This is a story of how I learned, painfully, that sometimes the person you love the most can ignore you until it's too late. My name is Lucas, and back then, Sophie and I were inseparable. We were one of those couples people admired, the kind that made others say, yeah, they're meant to be together. Our love felt effortless, late-night drives, deep conversations, and a connection so strong that nothing else seemed to matter. When we got married, it felt right. We had big dreams, traveling the world, building a life together, maybe even starting a family someday. And for a while, everything was perfect. But life has a way of shifting things when you least expect it. I was working hard to build my business from the ground up, putting in long hours, making sacrifices. But no matter how busy I got, Sophie was always my priority. I made time for her. Small surprises, spontaneous date nights, or just sitting together after a long day, making sure she always knew she mattered. At first, she appreciated it. She was proud of me, supportive, my biggest cheerleader. But then, she started changing. At first, it was subtle. She'd mentioned needing more time for herself, wanting space to focus on her own growth. I understood that. We all need room to breathe. I encouraged it. But then, it became something else. She started prioritizing herself in a way that had nothing to do with self-care. It wasn't about reading more, exercising, or doing things that made her happy. No, what she meant was doing whatever she wanted, without considering how it affected us. She stopped trying. Our plans no longer mattered to her. She rarely asked about my day. And yet, she still expected me to treat her like the center of my world. It was as if she wanted all the benefits of marriage without the responsibility of being a wife. I told myself it was just a rough patch. Every marriage has ups and downs, right? So I did what any devoted husband would do. I tried harder. I avoided arguments, let things slide. If something upset me, I brought it up calmly, but if it escalated instead of being resolved, I swallowed it down. Instead of confronting her, I showered her with love, small gifts, thoughtful gestures, things I knew would make her happy. Flowers, perfume, even the designer handbag she'd been eyeing for months. Anything to remind her that I still cared. But none of it made a difference. She'd say thank you sometimes, but it felt empty. No real emotion, no excitement. Just a distracted smile before she turned her attention elsewhere, usually to her phone. When she finally said she needed space, that she was trying to find herself, I didn't question it. I thought maybe she just needs time. So I gave her what she asked for. I stopped trying to hold on too tightly. I let her go out more, have her nights out, do whatever she felt she needed to do. But months passed, and things only got worse. She became more self-absorbed, like she was a protagonist of a story where I was just a background character. Someone to support her, but not to be loved in return. It felt like she believed she deserved better, as if being with me was her way of settling. And I won't lie, it hurt. I watched the woman I once loved slip further and further away. Not because I failed her, but because she convinced herself she could do better than me. When you love someone who no longer values you, it does something to your mind. You start doubting yourself. You wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm the problem. I didn't witness it firsthand, but I heard things. She drifted through relationships, bouncing from one man to the next, never finding anything that lasted. One by one, they all walked away. The attention she once craved, once lived for, began to feel empty, meaningless. The confidence she had once worn like armor started to crack. For the first time, she was truly alone, not because she chose to be, not for self-growth or reflection, but because she had driven away the one person who had genuinely loved her. How did I know? We still had mutual friends, people who kept in touch with her. And as for me, I wasn't looking back. After the divorce, I had a choice to make. I could have jumped into another relationship, searching for someone to fill the void. I could have numbed myself with fleeting distractions, temporary highs that would have ultimately meant nothing. But I knew that wasn't the solution. That wasn't what I wanted. I had spent years fading into the background of my own marriage. Now it was time to put myself first. So I did. I threw my energy into my business, using it as a foundation to rebuild. I poured myself into the work I had started from nothing, growing it stronger, expanding beyond what I once thought was possible. It became more than just a career. It became proof that I was capable, that I had purpose beyond being someone's husband. And the results came. My business thrived in ways I never imagined. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control again. At the same time, I focused on my health, physically, mentally, emotionally. I hit the gym, not just to look better, but to feel stronger. I paid attention to my diet, my sleep, the small ways I had neglected myself for years. I realized that some people will never appreciate you, no matter how much you give. And I refused to settle for anything that didn't genuinely add to my life. I wasn't going to let loneliness deceive me into running back to something broken or chasing relationships that weren't right. Instead, I embraced solitude without letting it turn into isolation. I became comfortable in my own company, something I hadn't felt in a long time, and slowly I flourished. That, more than anything, was my greatest victory. Years passed before I saw her again. It happened unexpectedly. I was out running errands, picking up a few things at a department store when I turned a corner, and there she was, Sophie, standing just a few feet away, clutching a shopping bag, staring at me like she had seen a ghost. For a moment, I barely recognized her. She still looked good. She had always taken care of her appearance. But something was different. Her eyes searched me, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Lucas." She finally spoke, her voice softer than I remembered, hesitant. I gave a polite nod, offering a small, effortless smile. "Hey, Sophie. Been a while." She let out a nervous laugh, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Wow, you look different." I shrugged. "Yeah, life's been good." She tried to keep the conversation going, asking about how I'd been, what I'd been up to. I answered casually, keeping things light. I wasn't cold, but I also wasn't giving her what she was searching for. I had no idea what was running through her mind, and honestly, I didn't need to. After a few more minutes of small talk, she hesitated, then offered a faint smile. "Maybe we could catch up sometime?" I returned the smile. "Yeah, maybe." We both knew we wouldn't. That chapter of my life was closed. But a few days later, she reached out. It started with a simple message, one of those casual, nonchalant texts. "Hey, it was nice seeing you the other day." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Against my better judgment, I replied. From there, the conversation trickled in. Nothing deep, nothing personal. Just casual exchanges, catching up, filling the silence with nostalgia instead of the resentment that once lived there. Over the next few weeks, she would send random messages about things that reminded her of me. And despite everything, I couldn't deny it. The feelings were still there. You don't just erase love overnight. But what I eventually understood was that love alone was never enough. The trust that had disappeared long ago. One evening, she suggested we meet. Just dinner. Just a talk. For a brief moment, I considered it. I won't lie, there was temptation. But then I asked myself the one question I had been avoiding. What was the point? Was I searching for an apology? An explanation? A chance to rebuild something that had already shattered beyond repair? No. Deep down, I knew the answer. I didn't need closure from her. I needed to give it to myself. So I declined. Not with bitterness. Not with hostility. Just a simple, I don't think that's a good idea. It took me a long time to admit that I was wounded, that Sophie had done more damage than I initially realized, not just because she left, but because of how she made me feel before she did. Unworthy, replaceable, never enough. At first, I convinced myself I was fine. I threw myself into my business, spent more time at the gym, surrounded myself with friends. But no matter how many distractions I found, there was a weight in my chest that refused to lift. And I knew, if I didn't deal with it, it would bleed into every aspect of my life. So, I did something I never thought I would do. I went to therapy. At first, it felt strange, sitting across from a stranger, unraveling years of pain I had buried. But week after week, I began to see things more clearly. I wasn't a fool for loving Sophie. I wasn't weak for trying to hold my marriage together. I was simply a man who had given his heart to the wrong person. And that wasn't a failure. It was a lesson. Healing didn't happen overnight. It wasn't some grand revelation where I suddenly felt weightless. It was in the small moments, the quiet victories. So I cut ties with Sophie completely. No more texts. No more casual check-ins. No more what-ifs. Before I deleted her number, I sent one last message. Not out of spite, not out of anger, just honesty. I wish you the best. Looking back, I used to think the only way to truly move on from someone who hurt you is to prove something, to make them see what they lost. But I realized something along the way. Revenge is pointless. Sometimes the best payback isn't payback at all. It's simply moving forward, becoming the best version of yourself, and letting them watch from a distance. And that, my friends, is exactly what I did.